All right, so kind of wanted to just kind of get a little something, I guess a little tidbit, off my chest here because I was watching I've been watching a couple like places where they've been talking about the whole Diddy situation and him being indicted and all this other stuff. And recently I watched the it's from Earn Your Leisure. It's called Blackout, but they had did like a special episode where they was talking about the whole Diddy situation, and I think they had like an attorney on there. I think he was like a civil rights attorney. And then Chris Gotti, who I think is I believe he's got to be related to Earth Gotti because they look damn near similar. I think he's older, but they had them too, that was talking about it. And I saw like a lot of people, they were saying that they don't think that Chris Gotti was the right person to put on there. I can kind of agree with that a little bit. Just considering just like the whole sexual allegation thing, and then with Earth Gotti and his whole situation with Ashanti and the stories that I mean, he damn near had like a whole confession about how he pushed himself on her and stuff like that, and he even had his own manipulation, and power that he used against her and probably some other people. So yeah, I feel like yeah, even though that's not Chris Gotti, specifically doing that, it is still that association. But outside of that, they talked about like, some things, mostly about like what to avoid, you know, when you're a person, within his circumstances, and I think I think he brought up like, some sort of like consent, for people to engage in sexual acts just for a level of protection. And, I think it was like mainly just like more critical thinking type of thing, so it wasn't so much of like exposing Diddy, but really just kind of like unpacking some of the layers underneath, that. And it's not to say that Diddy, didn't do what he did and he all of that should be swept under the rug. Of course not. Like, that needs to stop too, that whole sweeping things under the rug. Whatever is done, it needs to be put out in the forefront. But, it's not one against the other, and there are some things like, sexual consent being around that space around, especially around a lot of people who have power, and there's drugs floating around, and then how do you protect yourself? How anybody can protect themselves, which I thought was an interesting perspective that they explored. And I think also just separating just outside of like the crimes that he's done, the exposure with the baby oil, like the 1,000 bottles of baby oil and stuff like that. Like, I mean, technically speaking, the whole baby oil situation is not a crime, so his sexual endeavors, it really is private what people choose to do sexually, as long as it's under consent. But outside of all of that, Diddy still did what he did, and he still needs to, um, be brought to justice, Um, but I did notice that there was like comments in there, and there were a lot of people that are still like very much locked into the emotional reasoning for things, and not necessarily the logical reason about it, right? And I understand it's a touchy stuff. I feel like, a lot of people, especially women, and I'm gonna be honest, um, I think a lot of it does come from like a triggered place, and I do think that as a woman, there's been situations where we might have been in something like a little bit similar, maybe not to that extreme, but we might have been put in situations where there was peer pressure, put onto us, and we might have like engaged in sexual acts, and it is still a level of um, accountability, I guess that we take into it because I can only speak for myself. Like there were some situations where like I may not have been 100% comfortable, in engaging in sexual acts, but because there was this pressure, that was put on me, and it may not even have to be anything so blatant, it can just be the situation for what it is, and even some of that pressure can really just be in your own head, and you put more pressure on yourself instead of looking at the situation for what it is and knowing that you have other options, but besides that whole point, I noticed that there's a lot of people that are saying that they shouldn't be bringing up all these other factors, like the big thing, he is a rich and powerful black man, not the richest and not the most powerful, but as a black man, especially with the amount of influence and fame and notoriety that he has a lot of power, so of course, any black man who has a lot of power is a threat, to the machine. Whoever that nameless, faceless machine is, that entity, which it really is an entity, like he is a threat, and that does need to be taken into consideration. Like you can't just say like Diddy is just the monster, and that it's just we just got to just focus on just the sexual allegations because he shouldn't have did what he did. But let's just be honest. Like Diddy is not the only person doing it, okay? And it's still going on to this day. Like nothing has really changed like deep down in this infrastructure. Like it's still going on to this day. So yeah, like Diddy is pretty much being like the sacrificial lamb, in this. He is the human shield and all of this. He's the perfect distraction. And, again, he comes with a lot of power and influence on here. So I'm looking at this from like a very high corporate infrastructure level. Like this is not about Diddy, and this is not about anyone in particular. It is about the system in place and the people that get the most value out of it. That's really what it is. So I understand that, um, and I even saw like some comments, where people said, where's the women representation and stuff like that. And yeah, that maybe they should have had a woman on there, but it wasn't just women who were the victims. There were men who were victims too. Like, so people need to remember that too. Victims are victims. But yeah, like I just feel like some people, they really are passionate about this situation being about Diddy and what he did, and they're not looking at the overall picture, like the overall cause and effect about it. And Diddy, his one person, like in order for him to get all of this stuff accomplished, there has to be a system in place, right? Like he didn't just wake up one day and decide to do all of this stuff. Like this is influence, like he was taught these things, or he was put in environments where he was made to think that this was okay, and then it became a habit, and then people got, impacted by it, So there's a lot of moving parts, into this, and a lot of people, they really just tend to hone in and just have this tunnel vision on one aspect and be like, it don't matter about anything else, and it's just like, no, you have to factor in everything else. I even saw some comment that it was like there is no such thing as two sides. What? There's always two sides to it. There's duality to everything. Like even if it is two sides of the same coin, it's still the coin. Like there's always other signs. And so, you know, yeah, so like that was just like the main thing that, that was kind of going on my head, was that like a lot of people are having like this tunnel vision, and I really feel like yes, you can still have your compassion, for the victims. You can still fight for, anybody who really has been wrong, whether it was legally done or not. Like even like with the bad deals and stuff like that, on paper, they can't really prosecute him for the bad deals because it is still like a legally binding thing, but morally, yes, you can still, hold him accountable for all of that stuff. And ultimately, it really doesn't matter what jurisdiction it, whoever is throwing the book at him, like on a soul level, on a spiritual level, like his judgment is going to come. It's just inevitable, So and maybe this is the time, for that to happen. So yeah, Diddy's definitely going to answer, to his crimes, but I'm not. It's a lot bigger than Diddy. Like it's a whole lot bigger than Diddy. Like I mean, the white parties are still going on to this day. These rituals that these people are having, it's still going on to this day. Kids are still being violated to this day. People are still being put in compromising situation. And yes, while Diddy is being prosecuted, for this, I can't help but wonder why every time there is some sort of sexual thing going on, because again, we all know how hypersexuality works, especially in the black community. They hypersexualize black women and black men, So it's always like when it comes to like sex in the industry, and especially with hip hop being the most influential genre, out there, especially to the world, like it's always they always pick and choose who they want to be the mascot and the face behind it, And I think a lot of people, especially black folks, they need to kind of keep that in mind as to why they always keep this. They always keep certain Negroes, close and in their back pocket, because that's their wild card. That's their shield. That person is going to come in handy one way or another, And then and people don't see it, that way. Please don't understand. Please don't think that, if Diddy ends up getting life in jail or whatever, that this is just going to stop. Like it's one small, very, very small piece. And not to say that the impact is on other people, but this is one piece to a bigger, puzzle, so a bigger picture of this. So people really need to keep their foot on their necks and not just on his neck, because there are other parts in here. And some of them are in the magazines to this day, and some of them are still in these videos. They are still hosting these white parties, okay? And they are engaging in all of this right now too. Like, I mean, hell, Diddy got arrested and they found baby oil in his house. So he basically he didn't learn anything and he just continued to do it. If you think he's the only one that's acting that way, like you can't like he's not the only one that's acting like this. Um, Another thing, like I talked about it in, another video on how, like, again, from a high level, this is really just about the infrastructure, and this is really just a reorg. They are, um, the economy, is shifting. I wouldn't say like it's dwindling, but the economy is definitely shifting, and things are being exposed. And in order to save face, and ultimately, it's really every man for himself. Like, ultimately, everybody really is thinking about themselves, but it's a game of chess. So it's really just who's going to be made as a sacrifice to protect the overall goal, which is again ultimately that individual and the people that they care about. But even them, they don't even trust each other. I know they all don't really trust each other. This is why everybody keeps them in each other in their back pockets, right? But it's really just strategic on how they are performing these quote unquote layoffs, within the infrastructure. The only difference is Diddy, he has influence and he has power, and so like they can't just give him a pink slip and say, your job is done. No, like it's a lot. There's a whole plan, marketing plan, branding plan. Like there's a whole plan that's being plotted out, in phases throughout this stuff. And yeah, like I don't, and just for me, just like working like, and studying branding and marketing and all of that stuff, like I'm seeing like all these patterns that again, that's just happening here. So yeah, like it really is just value. If you have the value of the infrastructure, they would protect you, to some point. But as soon as you're not valuable anymore, and Diddy, he really hasn't been valuable for years now, and a big reason why is because he fucked over a lot of people, not just the people he sexually assaulted, but even his artists, like everybody knows the stigma that comes with attaching yourself to Diddy. It never works out. So like he's not valuable to them anymore, and no different than how you are in like a Fortune 500 company or any kind of corporation. As soon as you're not valuable to them, whether that's in productivity, whether that's in hours, or even like relationships, like if you're just no longer of value, you gotta go, you know? And that's just what it is. Yeah, his race is a factor, but it ain't even about his race either. Like it's really just that's just how I think is ultimately it really is human nature, unfortunately. But when power and resources come into play, people are willing to fight tooth and nail. They are willing to sell each other out. We all seen Game of Thrones and all these other things. Like these things really do happen. Um, and one more thing to close out. I'm gonna be very, very blunt, and it might trigger, some people, but like I really want to have to like say this. If you if you really think that the prosecutors, or maybe not even the prosecutors, I wouldn't say that. Like if you think that whoever is driving this whole Diddy prosecution, or the branding and all of this, or like if anyone who's like the driving force of putting Diddy in a situation or making him the face of the situation, if you think that this is about them bringing him to justice and having him answer for his crimes, and they're doing this to give justice to the victims and the people that he's done wrong, if you really think that all of this is being done because they are just trying to take the monster down, for the sake of the victims, it's not that at all. Okay, like on a high level, these people that are in place, that rub shoulders with Diddy, they don't give a fuck about the victims. They really don't. They don't give a fuck about the victims. One of the big reasons why, because it's still going on to this day. They don't give a fuck about the victims. They don't give a fuck about the children. Okay, they really don't care. They don't even give a fuck about Cassie. They don't give a fuck about any of the other guys. They didn't give a fuck about Pac. They didn't give a fuck about Diddy. I mean, not Diddy, Biggie, but even Diddy. Like, and I'm quite sure they don't give a fuck about his kids either, or any of ours. Like, it's not about the victims, okay? On a spiritual level, yes. On a moral level, yes. He definitely needs to he definitely needs to pay for his crimes. He definitely needs to. Karma is coming for that ass. But the justice system, like there ain't nobody. No, this is not about the damn victims. It's really not. It's really not. And I see a lot of people. They have so much faith, in this justice system, and they really feel like people are going forward with this because of integrity. And it really is not about integrity at all. Like it's not. This is about power. It's about resources. It's about influence. It's equity. Again, there's a shift that is going on just in the infrastructure, and that's just like, and when I say infrastructure, I don't mean like just business wise, just the system in place. There's many different systems on many different realms, and because of the shift that is happening, um everything is operating from a scarcity mindset. And of course with black people, and yeah, I am going to bring race into it because it is a factor. It really is. Black people are the ultimate resource. We've always been the ultimate resource. And if you got somebody that has a big source of it, and a big source of power and influence and stuff, that's their reserve, you know. And I kind of feel like Diddy was the reserve, that just came in handy, when the time came for it. And I don't know if Diddy ever realized that, maybe he got so comfortable that he forgot, at his core, like who he is. And that you really can't, like, not to say that you have to bow down to anybody, but you really still have to remember who it is that you're dealing with, and move accordingly. And I don't know, maybe he just been surrounded by people who he had a lot of influence and power over, but it wasn't the same when he came across people that had more power over him, you know. So, yeah, so that's all I kind of wanted to get on here and talk about. I really am trying to, like, because right now I'm like on a social media break, and I'm trying to not like feed so much into like the whole Diddy situation and the politics situation, because, again, I can see many different parts of this and many different reasons for it. But I don't know, like I just noticed that there's a lot of people, they are very reactive, and I can even see like the triggers, that is hitting for certain people. And I don't think that it's wrong to feel, a way about any of this, because honestly, it is disgusting on how, all of this has played out. But um, yeah, like I just feel like it's I think it's really just time for us to kind of like really just open our eyes. And while emotion is something that we can leverage, because again, we're human, so we need to have that compassion, but you have to balance it, and you have to consider all factors in all of this. And yeah, like I just kind of feel like there are some people that are kind of swinging to one thing and the other, but I do hope, though, at least, for the victims, who has been sexually assaulted or been in, some of these parties and felt pressured, or even people who had like these bad deals, and all this stuff. I'm hoping that at least with this situation, it can ease a little bit, of the pain. I don't think it'll solve a lot of it. I can't really speak for anyone, but it's definitely still a step in the right direction, for sure. But yeah, but like I said, this whole situation with Diddy, like it doesn't just stop here, and I don't want nobody to just kind of make an enemy out of Diddy as the person, and then more stuff, come up, and then, and they throw more black men or even black women, into the image. And then before you know it, everybody, now black people or black men or whatever, they are seen as like these sex crazed like monsters. Like how long have they been pushing that narrative? They've been doing that since the beginning. They've been doing that since birth of a nation. Like, come on now. Like, open your eyes to what is going on here. And I would also say one more thing. Um, I think just for us as a race, we really need to stop doing that whole sweeping things under the rug thing too, because again, a lot of these entertainers and a lot of the people that we look up to, they usually are in this space, and we're so enamored with how shiny, and put together that they are. They end up being the cookie cutter ideal person, and because of that, it's like a lot of people, they just tend to sweep things under the rug, and it's not really a factor. I'm gonna say it like, it's always easier for people to go through with all of this stuff when that person is likable, and to these days, some of these people, they are still likable. So like the things that they've done, even though it's been done in your face, and they might have said or did things in front of your face, people turn a blind eye to it because they still enjoy their music or their image or anything like that. So, but as soon as they leave a bad taste in people's mouth, like with Diddy and the bad deals and all of that stuff, he no longer became likable. And so it was easy for all of the sexual allegations and stuff to come out, and everybody could be like, "Oh no, you gotta go," because he ain't likable no more, you know. So yeah, so just kind of pay attention to a lot of it. A lot of this is cause and effect. A lot of this is just human nature. So, yeah, that's all I really want to get on here and talk about. So until next time.